Gain Super Flings are here to take your laundry to the next level.
Talking about Gain Super Flings. Super-sized laundry packs. These things are huge. Super fresh, super clean. Gain Super Flings.
Gain Super Flings laundry packs have 4 times the Oxy cleaning power and 3 times the Febreze freshness versus Gain Original Liquid.
Super fresh, super clean. Gain Super Flings.
Gain Super Flings for next level laundry.
Starting a business can be overwhelming. You're juggling multiple roles: designer, marketer, logistics manager, all while bringing your vision to life. But for millions of businesses, Shopify is the ultimate partner. Shopify is the commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world, and 10% of all e-commerce in the U.S. From household names like Mattel and Gymshark to brands just getting started. Build a stunning online store with Shopify's ready-to-use templates. Boost content with AI-powered product descriptions, page headlines, and enhanced photography. Marketing is easy with built-in tools for email and social media campaigns. Plus, Shopify simplifies everything from inventory to shipping and returns. If you're ready to sell, you're ready for Shopify. Turn your big business idea into with Shopify on your side. Sign up for your $1 per month trial today at shopify.com/try. Go to shopify.com/try. Shopify.com/try.
Frequency Podcast Network. Stories that matter, podcasts that resonate.
It's the last thing you want to think about during the holidays. But whether you want to address the elephant in the room or not, one day it might be too late. Symptoms of cognitive decline that differ from that of organic aging could be on the radar for many this holiday season, considering more than 20% of Canada's population is 65 or older. You know, it's the conversations that are tough, coming to terms with a parent that's showing signs of dementia, especially so for older women, as research suggests Alzheimer's disease disproportionately affects women. And then from there, the awkward, sometimes painful conversations with siblings or partners on how to navigate next steps or who will take on caregiving responsibilities, including financial burdens. But having these conversations sooner rather than later can actually push back cognitive decline and prevent it from showing up earlier than expected or hitting harder than what you thought. It's all about dealing with the issue with great sensitivity and understanding that there are ways to approach it without causing more damage. I'm Maria Kestane, and today on The Big Story, we're talking to Dr. Howard Chertkow, leading Canadian research scientist at Baycrest Health Sciences, to discuss how to say the quiet part out loud when it comes to cognitive decline and taking care of the ones we love the most. Dr. Chertkow, thank you so much for joining me today.
Delighted to be here, Maria.
I mean, it's a delicate topic, really, for just about everyone involved, but one that is so important to talk about sooner rather than later. Let's set the scene a little here. When we're with our parents and our grandparents and our relatives and, during the holiday season, what are some signs of natural, organic, age-related decline that shouldn't necessarily raise alarm bells, but maybe we should keep on the radar?
Well, that's a really good question. And the holiday season, you're seeing people that you might not have seen for 3 months or 6 months if they live somewhere else. So older people, and let's talk about your grandparents, for example, they come in and they're making little mix-ups. They're mixing up your name with your sister's name or kids' names, one little girl with another little girl and forgetting their ages, small things like that. That can be perfectly normal. If you're going shopping, they park in a parking lot and they have trouble finding their car because their visual memory isn't quite as good, that's okay. We see that a lot in older people. But what we don't want to see is major changes, and this can be major changes in memory. They forget exactly where they are, an entire conversation you had the day before, or they're not sure who are the children, who are the grandchildren, or forgetting major things when that's a change. They didn't do that a year ago. Or a change in function. For example, last year they arranged an entire holiday dinner, and this year they just can't pull it together, not because their hands are sore or they have arthritis, but because they simply can't organize. They can't plan, they can't organize. This is what we call executive function. It's part of the brain. It is something that perhaps even more important than memory. And we see these changes in early Alzheimer's disease. Or there are other changes. For example, someone who's been even-tempered their whole life, all of a sudden they're losing their temper for very little reason, becoming agitated, becoming angry, becoming anxious, or on the other side, becoming totally apathetic. They just don't care about what's going on anymore. So these things, when they're changes from before, these are all red flags. You don't want to see big changes in older people. Now, they could be caused by many things, and we look for if they're on a medication that's affecting their thinking. Maybe they haven't slept well, maybe they're in pain, maybe they're having sleep apnea, maybe they're depressed. But these things can also be harbingers of early Alzheimer's disease, early dementia.
Yeah, you laid out a lot there. I want to get into all of it, really. In terms of those natural signs of aging, not being as sharp in terms of memory, I'm curious to know, do any of those natural aging signs vary by gender? Are there certain qualities more related to women than men, or the other way around?
So women tend to have better memories in terms of many things to begin with. And the women tend to have a greater fall off in memory as the beginning of Alzheimer's disease, but there's not really a sex difference in these symptoms. The symptoms I mentioned are valid for men, they're valid for women. Now, you should be aware that Alzheimer's disease is more a problem of women, that 7 out of 10 patients with Alzheimer's are women. That's partly because women live longer and these are diseases of aging, and the argument is made that men have died from their diabetes or their heart disease, so they don't go on to develop dementia. But there are other reasons as well, why biological ones and social ones and psychological ones, why women tend to have more dementia than men. And part of it may be that women carry much more stress during their life. One of the greatest stress is a risk factor for getting dementia. And one of the greatest stresses that people have is being a caregiver, looking after their parents or looking after their family. And who is doing that looking after 9 out of 10 times? It's women. So there are things in their life that make women more prone to having higher risk for getting dementia. And that's why we see more women than men overall.
You touched on some of those signs of some, more red flags to look out for. I want to kind of dig into that a little bit. When we're around our family members throughout the holidays, whether it's dinners or parties, are there specific things that, our older relatives could be doing that maybe we brushed off as, oh, it's age related, or they're just like that, that's their personality, but really, clawing back, it's a sign of something more serious?
Again, it's a slippery slope. There are changes we would consider normal. For example, someone runs into a distant relative or an acquaintance they haven't seen in a year and can't remember their name. They haven't seen them in a year. But if they're unable to remember the name of close family members or people they just saw yesterday, this should be a trigger that this is significant memory difficulty. It's all right for an older person to say, is today the 15th or the 16th? But if they're no longer remembering accurately what is the month, if they can't tell you what else is going on in their life, for example, family events. I usually say, what about politics? I ask people about who's the prime minister, but some people pay no attention. But everyone pays attention to the marriages, the births, the events in their own family. And if an older person has forgotten those significant events, that should be a red flag that this is no longer normal. So it's a matter of degree. Forgetting small things is not worrisome. Forgetting big things is what you have to be worried about.
Right. I mean, how In terms of reaction, as a kid myself, my parents aren't really aging, but when I see my parents reacting to what their parents do, it's tough because I can see it's hard for them to kind of accept certain realities. When we see our older relatives forgetting those bigger things and doing things that they wouldn't regularly be doing, what do you think is, I guess, proportionate to reaction in these kind of situations?
First of all, you have to realize when there's real brain damage, something leading to dementia, be it Alzheimer's disease, or the second major cause is problems with blood flow, vascular disease from high blood pressure or diabetes. The person who has those may be less aware of the changes than their family, their spouse, their children. So we see this all the time. The person involved says, no, my memory is pretty good, it's fine. But the family says, no, your memory's gotten very, very poor. So that's the first thing. And it's families will say, oh, I think he's in denial. It's not necessarily denial, it's actual lack of awareness of the changes. So you have to keep that in mind, and it takes a lot of sensitivity from family members. And first of all, there's no little use in confronting people. Certainly there's no need to be negative and make people feel ashamed or embarrassed. There's also little advantage in trying to say, try harder, Deb. You're not trying to remember. You should be trying harder. You could do better. None of those things are effective. The first thing is to talk among the family members and say, our grandfather has changes. Has he or she seen their doctor? And this needs to be investigated. If it's not normal, if the family's worried, you really have to get the person to have medical evaluation for multiple reasons. First of all, it might be something correctable. We see low thyroid, we see sleeping pills, we see sleep apnea, we see a range of problems that result in memory loss, which have to be investigated and can be treated. And in those cases, you're not doing the person a favor by delaying them getting to the doctor. Then there are things that can be mistaken for memory loss. For example, people who have significant hearing loss and they deny it, or they don't want to put on hearing aids, and the family thinks he's not remembering. Well, the fact was he wasn't hearing accurately, and that's why he wasn't remembering. So these things have to be looked into and evaluated. And then a diagnosis. Is there something correctable? In many cases, there is not, and this is something like Alzheimer's disease, but in some cases, blood pressure that wasn't being treated, high blood sugar. We've had people have these other medical illnesses attended to in reverse, and it improves the situation. And finally, there's depression. Depression in the elderly is a very real thing. People stop to eat, they're not sleeping, they don't have a purpose in life, they're sad, and their memory, their attention gets impaired. So if there is depression, even in depression in someone who's 80 or 85 or 90, it's not right to say, well, obviously they're depressed, they're 85 years old. No, depression at any age is a medical condition, and it responds to treatment. You get the people on antidepressants, and they can give them a whole new view of life and give them some good years instead of being depressed. So I think that's the key thing. So this is a delicate conversation, and it has to be figured out who's going to have the conversation, who's the spouse or the closest, the children together or closest relatives, to make sure that someone gets to their doctor and gets medical evaluation to see if something can be done.
That's the sound of James adding long-lasting Gain scent boosters to his laundry this morning. Several hours later, James sniffs the irresistible scent of Gain on his shirt. Gain. Several hours later, James has even caught the attention of his mother-in-law, and she never gives him attention.
Ooh, you smell amazing, James.
Oh, thanks, Mom. I love you too.
I never said that.
Add Gain scent boosters to your laundry. Add joy to your day.
I mean, how do we tackle these honest and sometimes pretty tough conversations? I mean, do you have any plan of attack that you suggest to people? Because it's hard and it is case by case. You don't always have the same family dynamics per family. So, yeah.
Well, it can be very hard, and it's hardest when the children disagree. Sometimes one of the children is in denial and says, no, our dad is fine, he's fine, he's fine. And the other say, look, obviously he's not fine. His memory, he did this and that, he's not performing the same way. So you have to have a conversation with the person involved and say, we've been watching you over the holidays, we're worried about you, we want to go with you to your doctor and talk about this. And this is very important. One thing that every person should know is always make sure the person doesn't go to their doctor alone if they're concerns about memory, because you don't want to be in a situation where the person says, I went to my doctor. Okay, what did the doctor say? Well, I don't think he said anything. Or come back and say, the doctor said I was fine. And then the doctor says, no, I didn't say he was fine. I said we have to get an MRI and blood tests. And people are worried about this. It's stressful. And the biggest fear, of course, is that if you go to the doctor will A, put you in a nursing home, or B, take your driver's license away. And these are huge fears among the older people. And look, the reality is that both of those may be in the cards for someone who develops a dementia. But you don't want to jump the gun and people assume, I go to the doctor, he's putting me in a nursing home, I'll never drive again, my life is over. It's also, you have to stress that the possibility that first of all, something treatable will be found. And second, let's say after investigation, it does prove to be the very early stages of dementia, such as Alzheimer's. Well, now we're in a new age where we're starting to get medications to slow the progression and hopefully to delay progression and even stop it. So you're not doing someone a disservice by saying, no, don't go to the doctor. They're going to do something terrible to you. So we have to change that mindset. And part of this, of course, is stigma. The stigma of dementia is like the stigma of mental illness. People feel their friends will leave them, they'll be alone, they'll be abandoned. And we have to get over that as a society. We have to start treasuring older people, supporting them and helping them to preserve their healthy brains.
You mentioned something really interesting there, family helping out and family, helping kind of guide that and help make those changes, which is a beautiful thing. But the reality is there is that burden of responsibility on, that sandwich generation, the generation of people who have older parents and people who have younger kids that, are right in that sandwich spot. I mean, what advice do you give to them who probably feel, a lot of responsibility, who feel the burden of taking care of their parents and kickstarting, activities and making sure they're doing okay, while also kind of still being their child at the end of the day, still being that, that's their parents. It's emotionally very tough.
So, of course, this is the tough one. The 100 years ago or 200 years ago, families consisted of those who were working and looking after their kids and the parents living with them, everyone living together, eating together, stimulating each other. And that family cohesion was very good for their kids because they had the grandparents around to do homework with them. And it was good for the grandparents because they stayed members of the family. And now we've moved away from it. So many older people are living alone, especially women who have lost their spouse. Usually the husband dies first and they become isolated. And we have different families where both man and woman in a couple are working and looking after their kids. So how do you handle that caregiving burden of the older parents? And it's tough. The only good thing to say is that there are more facilities available. There are day centers, community programs. There are systems where vans or minibuses go and pick people up and take them to community centers. They're community resources. So the challenge is to find out what's available and tap into them in a creative way. And sometimes, nursing homes, although older people are often very afraid of what they mean, provide social stimulation and company and activities. So the challenge for everyone in this sort of sandwich generation is finding the activities that will keep the older parents happy and fulfilled and stimulate them, while not going back to the 100 or 200 years ago where the parents move in with you, because often people don't have room now and have different lifestyles.
You said, a lot of the times these things can be treated, and I'm curious to know, in terms of the research, what does the research say when it comes to certain symptoms that could be a slippery slope if not treated? But if they are treated and they're detected early, then you could be preventing, a lot of years that could be spent suffering, but instead, you're getting ahead of it and you're treating it.
Well, I don't think it's one single symptom you can look at it, but it's the change. It's sort of the gestalt. And if you as a family member say, my father, my parent, my grandparent has changed in any one of these ways, memory, planning, behavior, emotional, things that lead the family to think, there must be something going on in the brain, that's the time to look for help, because it's hard to predict, and it depends on people's what we call premorbid situation. For example, someone who is a little bit paranoid, as they develop brain changes, they're presenting symptom, maybe they become very paranoid, and that's different from someone who has emotionally very at a good equilibrium beforehand. As they develop brain changes, it may affect their memory. So you don't want to generalize and say, memory problems are fine, paranoia is not fine. These are all worrisome symptoms. And the thing about brain disease in the elderly is very, we call heterogeneous. What happens in one person is different from another. Memory, obviously, if you have a conversation with an older person, a relative, your grandparent, and the next day they not only cannot remember the gist, they don't remember having seen you the day before. That's certainly something you're going to be worried about and get them to the doctor. But I gave the example of not being able to plan the meal, not being able to function, getting into small car accidents. What caused that? So there can be all these things are red flags that should trigger a family getting worried, and things to watch for over the holidays. On the other hand, you have to realize that older people over the holidays, they may not be performing as well. Maybe they got no sleep the night before, or there's a lot of stress around the holidays, and so you may not be seeing someone at their best. But it's a time to really reevaluate how everybody's mental and psychological health is that you haven't seen for 3, 6, 12 months.
My last question for you, is there any support or programs or funding that Ottawa can help out with in terms of, pushing early testing or implementing some rigorous health guidelines to make sure people are getting the care they need when they need it?
I think that we're moving into a period when prevention of the problems of aging are going to become much more important in society. I mean, we have an aging society, and we all know that, and the numbers, the government knows the numbers, and we do have a public health agency, but I can't say they're doing very much in terms of what can be done to preserve brain health. We have a national organization I'm scientific director of called the CCNA, the Canadian Consortium on Neurodegeneration and Aging. This is funded through the Federal Minister of Health, and we're developing prevention programs, an education program for all Canadians to go over many of the things I've talked about and more about what people can be doing in their lifestyle. And hopefully the federal government public health agency will eventually roll that out for Canadians. In the meantime, health is a provincial affair, and health is very much relies on institutions. So Baycrest is very active in having a dementia prevention center. We're developing on the Baycrest website, there are videos you can look up. We made 15 videos on things people can do to preserve their brain health. For example, I've talked about exercise, and I've talked about not being lonely, but other things like flossing your teeth, getting hearing aids. There are many things that people can do that they may not know about. So we need to have, and I hope we'll see, a national program where it's personalized, people are evaluated, because some people are at higher risk of having bad brain aging leading to dementia, and other people are at lower risk, and we need to target those at higher risk, get them into exercise, get them into prevention programs, give them the education and the tools, and ultimately this may involve medication and prevention medication, the same way that people go on drugs to lower their cholesterol to prevent stroke and heart attacks. There's going to come a time when we go on medication to prevent dementia. We're not quite there yet, but I think developing the dementia research programs is hugely essential. Like what the federal government can do is say, we really want to fund research in there's a dementia national strategy passed by Parliament, which said we should be funding dementia research at 1% of the cost of dementia in Canada. This was passed 5 years ago, never enacted. Our dementia research in Canada is nowhere near the 1% that was a goal. So just enacting what Parliament agreed to in the Dementia National Strategy would be a major step forward.
Well, a very important conversation. Lots of great tips here. Dr. Howard Chertkow, thank you so much for joining me today.
You're very welcome. Delighted to be here.
And that was The Big Story. Be sure to share this episode with a friend or whoever you think may enjoy it. You can send us feedback or episode suggestions at hello@thebigstorypodcast.ca or find us on Blue Sky at The Big Story. You can listen to The Big Story on the Seeker app or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Maria Kestane. Thanks for listening.